Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for practice owners and leaders, where we are obsessed with how to build a successful practice and get a life too. Hi, I'm Chuck Blakeman, and we're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time, get off the treadmill, and rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. Today, I want to talk about the 7 stages of practice ownership. This is our third podcast in a series of 3. Check out the other 2. This one's the last one on the outside influences that will get in the way of getting through those 7 stages. A quick recap of the ones we covered in the other 2 podcasts. The 7 stages themselves: Stage 1, startup; Stage 2, survival; Stage 3, subsistence; Stage 4, stability, where most practice owners stop, where they're making money, but they're on a treadmill for 30 years. Stage 5, where you finally begin to break out of all that. You experience what we call the big mindset shift. And in Stage 5, you have for the first time both time and money, and you're off the treadmill. Then Stage 6, significance, where you have leadership in place, but not really in charge yet. And Stage 7, succession, where you've got leadership in charge, and you have the opportunity now to have real deep freedom. Check out both those podcasts to get a real clear understanding of the 7 stages before you go through this one. All right, so this podcast is going to be about the things that will influence that journey through the 7 stages of practice ownership. Number 1, there is no timeline for maturity. I've seen practice owners take their practice from Stage 1 to startup to Stage 6 significance in just a few years. I also know way too many who are stuck in Stage 4 stability as hostages to their practices and chained to a treadmill for 25 or more years. There is no timeline for moving through the stages, but the more intentional you are in getting through them, the faster it will happen. I can't tell you how many clients I've had who were stuck in Stage 4 for 2 decades, but obtained real freedom in Stage 5 or 6 very quickly in 18 months or less because they changed their intention. You get what you intend, not what you hope for. Intend to get there fast. Another thing to understand about the 7 stages is there's no such thing as being neatly all in one stage. Life is messy, so is business, but you still get to choose what maturity looks like. My business is intentionally strung out across stages 5, 6, and 7, which is the way I like it. I will do Stage 5 production. I love to work with dentists and their team members and also do as many keynotes and workshops as I can. The difference is I can choose to do it versus I have to do it. That's freedom. We also have Stage 6 leadership in place, people who need guidance on how to get things done, as well as vision for where we're going. I'm not the only one who gives that guidance, but I do enjoy training and mentoring others and helping them grow. And a lot of our business functions in Stage 7. I learn about it after it happens, or sometimes not at all, because the people doing it are competent and they're really fully in charge. As an example, I've been told twice now that we were getting expanded office spaces. And I've seen a lot of things I used to decide on being fully taken on by others. I've even been fired from some meetings I started. That's very humbling. I'm pretty sure our staff loves me being involved in Stage 5 production activities with clients, keynotes, and workshops because it keeps me farther away from the day-to-day. And as our 2 companies grow, I will continue to work to be less and less involved in running them. But I like being strung out across Stage 5 and 6. Personally, I never want a completely Stage 7 succession business where I'm just the myth. The myth comes in so seldom, and when they walk through the building, people whisper, "Hey, that's the guy who started it." It works for some, but not for me. We will always have a business where my ownership and responsibilities are stretched across Stage 5, 6, and 7. And I would never dream about selling this business. If the business is working for you, and if your practice is working for you instead of you working for it, there's no sensible reason to sell it because it's a true asset, both in time and money. Whereas most Stage 4 practices and businesses are assets when it comes to money, but total liabilities when it comes to time. Another influence: no practice owner ever arrives at a desired stage and just settles in. It's not like you get to Stage 6 or Stage 7 and there's permanence. Again, life and business are messy, and as a result, every practice will cycle back and forth regularly through 2 or 3 stages. If you are shooting for a Stage 5 practice, your relationship to your practice will bounce around between 4 and 5, sometimes hitting 6, sometimes back to 3. The good news is that if you've been intentional about a simple strategic plan and freedom mapping, both future podcasts, you'll find that getting back to your desired stage is no longer the extended struggle it used to be. Setbacks happen, but you bounce back quicker. Another influence: higher stages cycle less. If you decide to settle in as a stage 6, you're going to cycle a lot less than someone who has settled in as a stage 4. A classic American dream practice, stuck in stage 4 stability, will cycle very regularly, down and back up, 4-3-2, 3-4-3, 2-3, etc. You will spend 30 years cycling between profitability and survival as treadmill doctor, another reason why stage 4 is so exhausting over the long haul. But a stage 5 practice is more likely to cycle less broadly, usually moving from 5 to 4, where you move from where you have a lot of time and money to I just am making money. And sometimes you'll hit 3 where you're breaking even before you can pull yourself back up to 5. A stage 6 practice will cycle even less, 6-5, 6-5, 6-5, sometimes back to where you're really busy but still making money. And a stage 7 practice cycles even less. The more mature the practice, the less it will be jerked around by outside forces like the economy. Stage 6 allows you to be freedom doc, not hostage doc. Another motivation to build a mature practice is that when you are in, for example, stage 6, you might get pulled back to stage 4 for 6 months after you lose key people or a recession hits. That means that for a while you're really busy again in the day-to-day, but you're still profitable. That is not a bad problem to have. But if you are a classic stage 4 practice owner and the same circumstance hits you, you will likely be pulled back 2 stages and end up in stage 2 survival, where you're breaking even or probably losing money for a few months. Which bottom do you prefer? That should motivate you to build a mature practice. I prefer a bottom at stage 4, an absolute bottom at stage 4. Okay, that's enough about cycling through the stages. I want to talk a little bit about the risks and why they're worth taking. By now, you've probably figured out that the difficulty of the 7 stages of practice ownership is that moving from one stage to the next almost always requires risking some time, some money, usually both, which we illustrated in an earlier podcast focused on the roller coaster treadmill illustration. Listen to that one if you haven't yet. The climb from stage 1 startup to stage 3 subsistence is one long cliff face with no breaks. We're in stage 2 survival almost the whole time, and we either keep climbing or rappel down and quit. Once we finally get to stage 4 stability, we now have something to lose. We're making money, and in some cases a lot of it. And taking the risk required to stage 5 success seems too daunting. Even though the voice of quiet desperation is whispering, is this all there is? We weigh what we have with the possibility of losing it and come to the following conclusion: the pain I know is better than the pain I've yet to experience. I'm not going to risk the fact that I'm profitable just to get to where I would have some freedom. So we stay stuck in stage 4 for 30 years until at the end we sell the practice for the assets and the patient list. What we haven't realized is that at every new stage, the risks are usually smaller and of shorter duration. And if we'll just keep pushing forward, we'll build up our mental muscles for dealing with them. A little more on why stage 4 is so risky. Stage 4 is a mirage. It looks like a practice, but as we've seen, it's really at best a well-paying job. Some months or years are great, but outside influences create conditions that move the practice back into stage 3 or even stage 2. Then the owner has to do the long, hard climb back to profitability before the cycle repeats itself all over again. The risks for any practice are much higher hanging out in stage 4 stability than they ever would be if the owner intentionally moved to stage 5 success or beyond. A stage 4 practice that cycles back to stage 2 takes income right out of the practice owner's pocket. A stage 5 practice that cycles back to 3 might require layoffs, and you might have to take over some of the production yourself, but your personal income is likely to not take a hit. A stage 6 or 7 practice is even more insulated against the owners taking a personal hit during any kind of cycles. You are not safer by staying stuck in stage 4 stability where you're just making money. You are safer by creating some space between you and the production. If you are the producer, you are at greater risk than if you have others producing for you or with you. Warren Buffett's salary doesn't go down during recessions, neither does Richard Branson's. Think like Warren and Richard. Don't be the sole producer. Choose to do dentistry for the love of it, not because you have to in order to pay the bills. That is so freeing. A couple more thoughts on how to deal with risks. Dealing with risk is actually pretty simple. Again, refer back to the roller coaster treadmill illustration from our earlier podcast on it. The key is to start with a very clear idea of where you're going, what it looks like, and when you expect to be there. We don't like that when question, but it's one of the most powerful, least asked questions in business. Ask the when question. When do you expect to be at your ideal lifestyle? Then make sure that place is motivating enough for you to push through to the finish line. If you've got that, then you will make decisions based on where you want to end up, not on where you are. It's extremely simple. I admit it is not easy, but the more clarity you have about where you are going, the easier it will be to make long-term decisions instead of short-term ones. Do you know what your practice looks like at maturity? Have you painted that picture? Write it down and put some emotion in it. Here's what it makes me feel like. Do you know when you want to be there? Most of us have never thought about either of those things, but if you do, it could be the most motivating thing you've ever done. And each stage will seem shorter and less risky because you've got something so compelling in front of you. The tyranny of the urgent will lose its shrill voice as you focus on the priority of the important. It did for me. For 5 businesses, I did this wrong, and in the 5th one, I had a very compelling place I wanted to be, and it made a difference. Let's solve the ping pong ball problem. This is about the basics of building a mature practice. Imagine trying to keep 11 ping pong balls under the water with only your 10 fingers. You're never done because every time you get the last one submerged, another pops up. You've got 10 fingers and 11 ping pong balls. Here's the simple problem. We're so busy trying to control the 11 ping pong balls with our own 10 fingers that we don't have time to figure out how to hold down hundreds of ping pong balls by actually solving this permanently. It never even dawns on us that it is possible to hold down hundreds because we're too focused on the 11 we're fighting with today. The simple solution? There's a lot of people out there with a lot of fingers that they can apply to those ping pong balls. As we've seen before, the key is dual tracking, simultaneously paying attention to the practice today and the tyranny of the urgent, while also paying attention to the future of the practice and the priority of the important. Use every activity possible to pay your monthly bills and build a practice that makes money later when you're not there. One last very important consideration. There are 3 things that will prevent us from losing focus and being ruled by the tyranny of the urgent. One is a big why and the other 2 are bosses. We need 1 big why and we need 2 bosses. The big why, which we'll be walking through in detail in a few other podcasts, is our long-term objective that powers us through the toughest of times. I want this so bad, I keep going. A simple 2-page strategic plan, also a couple of future podcasts, is boss number 1, giving us clear direction on the priority of the important and how to attack it every week. It's amazing when you take something out of your head and you put it on a piece of paper. It gets a life of its own and becomes your boss, if you let it. And the second boss is outside eyes. People who have no dog in the hunt who can give us great feedback. And yes, we'll be doing a podcast on outside eyes so you can get a full grasp of it too. Stay tuned. The big why and the 2 bosses keep us moving toward building a practice that makes money while we're not there. Use your lifetime goals, your strategic plan, and your outside eyes on your practice to encourage you to spend time on the important, not just the urgent. If you allow the 2 bosses to motivate you to build a practice that makes money, you're more likely to build a practice that makes a lot of money and more likely to achieve your lifetime goals. Making money is not an empowering vision, but if you have something bigger than making money driving you, you are much more likely to make a lot of it. Getting to stage 5, 6, or 7 is your choice. You get to intend to do it, and you get to decide which of those stages works best for your ideal lifestyle. Whichever one you choose is your version of a mature practice. In the next podcast, we're going to reveal the very powerful, simple concept of a practice maturity date, what it is, how to get there, and what it's going to do for you and your focus on the important. Again, if you'd like a fancy version of the 7 stages of practice ownership emailed to you, just email Krista at cranksetgroup.com, Krista, or grow@cranksetgroup.com. She gets them both. And we'd love to share it with you for your ongoing focus and reference. What do we do next? Let's figure out where we are on the 7 stages, where we want to end up, how long we think it's going to get there, and then let's get involved in a practice maturity date and drive ourselves to an ideal lifestyle. There's a lot of things we can do here. Let's pick the first one. What is the first one thing you can do as a result of this podcast? By when are you going to do it? And who will you get support from? Let them know, get them involved, and get a plan of action and some accountability. If this podcast was helpful, please subscribe by computer or by phone, or connect with us at www.gottsummit.com, 2 T's, G-O-T-T summit.com. That stands for Get Off the Treadmill. We have those summits quarterly for dental practitioners only. Or connect with us at www.chuckblakeman.com or email us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. let's get off that treadmill. Let's get into the participation age. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thanks.